Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Podcast Host Revealed. I'm Andrew Menczel, and today I am joined by Velma Vouloir, who is a nationally awarded stripteaser, burlesque dancer, teacher, writer, and the host of the Cntroversy podcast. The podcast was awarded the Best Sex and Relationships podcast at last year's Australian Podcast Awards. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have Velma with me. Velma, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
So great to have you on. I love both names. I love your name, Velma Vouloir. I hope I got pronunciation right.
Yeah, you
And I
did. You
love
did actually.
good. And I love the name of your podcast, Cntroversy. So, um, yeah, great stuff. Congratulations on the award. Um,
Thank
uh,
you.
yeah, I heard you saying on your show that you kind of regretted not going to the award ceremony in Sydney.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was really a classic case of just self-sabotage. Controversy is a very new show. We only started in sort of March last year of 2021, and I think I just got a little bit in over my head about what my experience would be at the award ceremony. I think just all of that self sabotage kicked in, and I kept thinking, oh, I won't know anyone, or I won't have anyone to talk to, or yeah, and I just kind of psyched myself out of going. Which
You're in Melbourne, yeah?
retrospectively, yeah, I am in Melbourne.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
a bit of a trip. I actually live around the corner from where the awards were held, so I had no excuse not to go.
yeah.
Um,
Did you
anyway,
go?
look, I did go, won two
Yeah,
bronze medals,
amazing.
so it was awesome fun,
Oh,
and
congratulations.
hopefully you'll come to another awards um, night, and we'll get to meet in person.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I have no excuses now. I think that was a difficult lesson to learn, and I learned it the hard way. Yeah, you just gotta do all the things and not psych yourself out. But I'll be there. I'll be there this year. Don't worry.
Well, let's start off with the how I ask all the guests. How would you describe your podcast, Controversy?
I would describe it as a kind of part sort of historical, part sociological, part psychological, uh,
Mm.
sort of part comedy, I guess, but that's mostly just due to my kind of uh, ineptitude more than anything. But yeah, it's basically it fits into so many categories, which is really what I wanted it to do. But fundamentally, when people say, "Oh, what's the show about?" I sort of say, "Well, it's kind of just about eroticism, and that can be in any kind of facet. So whether that is historically, in media, in politics, in art, having guests on the show that are involved in eroticism in some form through their work, through their day-to-day lives. Yeah, and I suppose just kind of just unraveling what that term means and how it presents itself and how it kind of affects us all in so many different ways, whether that's intentionally or unintentionally. And I guess just shining a big old bright light on a lot of people and stories and histories that maybe haven't been given the recognition that they deserve because of their air quote explicit kind of content or um, taboo nature, I suppose. So
Mm.
yeah, I'm a big lover of storytelling more than anything. So for me, it's just about vocalizing and just getting stories out there that maybe people otherwise wouldn't get the chance to hear about.
Yeah, I love your show, and I think you're right that it has so many different facets to it. I love history, and I love the way you go back and retell some stories, but change the perspective a little bit and maybe question some of the historical biases and make us look at things differently. And so I love that part of the show. I also love the fact that you put bits of yourself in the show. So you'll talk about how your life is going and add little bits of that into the show, which I think is really good because get to know the host is obviously more engaging. Yes, but what amazes me is the amount of research that you put into the episodes. Must take hours.
Oh, don't even get me started. It's yeah, look, the research component when I am uh doing an episode, especially that, is historically based, doing the research is really, really important to me, and it is a very, very, very lengthy part of the process, but it's important. We want to get the facts right, and I want to get I think it's so easy to kind of just Google something and get a quick answer, but I think it's really important to kind of go a little bit deeper. And I find it really interesting when you do research something in depth, not just with the first 5 hits you get on
Mm.
Google search, but a little bit deeper. Going to libraries, looking through literature, speaking to people. It's amazing, you do get those little indiscrepancies, and I really enjoy kind of laying all that out on the table and sort of going, well, this said this person said this, so this isn't clear. I just think we live in this kind of day and age where we kind of just Google something, and the first thing that comes up, we kind of just take that as the gospel. And yeah, so look, the other side of that though is that it's exhausting.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
it's a really lengthy process, but
Mm.
it's what we have to do.
Yeah, I studied history at uni, so I really pick up on the excellent sources you're using and the fact that you do, check everything. So that does come through. And did I
Thank
hear you say
you.
your mother was an influence on this?
Look, probably my grandmother is
Grandmother.
probably someone who I kind of attribute as being a bit of an underlying influence, purely because, well, she's hilarious for one, but growing up, I think she was probably someone who really encouraged and sort of supported my love of extravagance and kind of showbiz and beautiful women. And yeah, so I think she probably piqued uh my love of the feminine, the erotic feminine,
Mm.
probably before anyone else did. So yeah, you can all blame her, I think.
Excellent. So, why did you start Controversy? What inspired you to start a podcast?
I guess there are a few different things. One thing is that I have always loved writing, communications, blogging, journalism, things. I still have a well-intended dream of retiring in some big farm property and just writing novels. I love that aspect, but podcasting is such an epic way to reach people, to find diverse community, to find specific information about things. So that's the fact that it was really accessible was a really awesome thing, and especially the fact that with podcasting you do have that opportunity to kind of self-produce right off the bat, which was great. But in terms of why I wanted to start the content specifically, so I work full time in creative arts. I'm a full time burlesque performer. I also work in cabaret, drag cabaret, and I'm also a teacher as well. I also teach burlesque, and teaching burlesque is something that I absolutely adore. But one thing that I found for myself that I wasn't able to give to my students as much as I would like to is that historical element to it. So many people, they think of burlesque, they think of the movie with Christina Aguilera, or they think of, big cabaret shows like the Moulin Rouge, or they think of, I don't know, there's so many little things that we
Mm.
think of, but I think, and I understand that, there's that draw cut of burlesque. It's like this really fun, kind of enigmatic, erotic style of dance. It's really sexy, it's really glamorous, but people maybe don't have the context of where it came from, you know, burlesque is such an umbrella term. And yeah, so I found myself kind of dragging on and on in my classes about, this is the origin. This move came from this person, and this person was a sex worker who was from here and here. And, some people really kind of were magnetized to that and were like, oh God, I want to know more, keep talking. And then some people, were like, that's, I don't really care. I'm just here to have a good time and then leave. So I think I sort of started brewing the idea for the show slowly as a way to kind of go, well, I tend to think that people who are interested in this stuff are really interested. So it was a way for me to kind of put all of that desire to express that information in a little bubble and kind of go, well, you know what? If people want to access it and be a part of it, then I can create this as sort of a separate little entity for them. And also, I think my life growing up, I have had, the people that are in my life are predominantly showgirls, sex workers, drag queens, and I guess I've sort of had over and over so many people sort of describing my life as, wow, it must be so strange, or it must be really interesting, and you have all these fascinating people, and it's absolutely true. But I think it's that concept that people sort of look at you, or my loved ones and the people I spend time with, as other, as these kind of people in the fringe of society, or people who must live these radically different lives. And I think another element of the show is really just having realistic day-to-day conversations about the things that myself and my friends and colleagues and loved ones genuinely do talk about, and just to kind of maybe take out a little bit of stigma around these things, maybe just to let people kind of in on what they might perceive as being kind of strange or other. I think having, when it's me and you're sitting down and you're having a conversation with a foot fetish model, and we're laughing about all the things that we usually laugh about, people can kind of listen and go, I mean, yes, these guys are absolute, uh, idiots, and they're silly and whatever, but they're people, and and I can relate to a lot of the things that they're talking about, and it kind of just takes that sort of screen out of the middle of things like that. I think as well, with especially with sex workers, one thing that I always love telling people who have an attitude of, oh, I've never met a sex worker, or I'm not, I don't know that sort of the lifestyle or what's kind of
Mm.
involved. I always just say, oh no, you do. You do. I promise you do know a sex worker. You just don't know you do. Just things like that. So I think it's also just about kind of fusing together that my love of history and telling the stories of people who during their time, their stories may have been suppressed. Oh God, suppressed
Breathless.
due to suppressed due to the nature of what they did, but then kind of also interlacing that with being able to tell the stories of people who are in the here and now and doing it in the moment.
Mm.
Yeah, sorry, I'm
It's
waffling, aren't I?
No,
I'm
but
just
that's a
like,
bit no, that's a broad no, that's a broad, like a huge undertaking, break down barriers, tell historical stories, shine a light on other different pockets of society. I mean, it's a great ambition, and I think by telling the stories through history, it shows how things are misconstrued now.
absolutely.
So I think that it's really powerful. So a couple of questions. A, did you know what you were getting into when you started a podcast?
No, no, I did not. And I think I'm only really just starting to kind of land on that properly now. I actually haven't released any episodes in a little while, purely because I kind of went, okay, if I'm going to continue to do this, which I absolutely am, I sort of, I need to go, okay, I need some help. I need to have a bit
Mm.
more of a plan involved, because I sort of just jumped in a little bit gun ho blind, as I do with a lot of things, and very quickly, especially because it took off very quickly as well. I really wasn't expecting it to be kind of as successful as it was straight away. So all of a sudden, this thing that was going to start as a really small time, whenever I could find time kind of thing, really grew into this living, breathing little
Mm.
baby monster very quickly. And I love the little monster so much. But yes, it was definitely like, oh God, it's really not just a matter of kind of sitting in front of a microphone, having a chat for 40 minutes and then uploading it. There's the research, there's the fact checking, there's the writing, there's the recording, there's the editing, there's all the marketing, like everything that kind of, there's responding to people who have wonderful things to say about the show and reaching out. It just kind of, yeah, it makes you go, oh, this is a full-time job for many people, and I already have a lot of those. So yeah, definitely, completely out of my league.
And have you enjoyed the challenge?
Oh, I love it. I'm kind of furious that I didn't start doing it sooner, to be honest, but I'm loving the challenge of, learning different things. It's definitely lit a fire under me in terms of delving back into that historical research part of my life. It's connecting me to some really epic people. I love it. I cannot say enough good things. I just need to actually maybe delegate a little bit, get a little bit
Mm,
of help, which
absolutely.
I am doing, but yeah.
So with that huge ambition, how do you feel it's gone? Like, has it sort of turned out the way you envisaged? Are you sort of happy with what you've delivered?
Thus far, yes, I think that I am happy. I think one of the reasons that I didn't start the I sort of sat on the idea and started accruing information and stuff for a good kind of 2 years before I actually even started putting episodes out. And I think that was because I was terrified of, oh, what if it's terrible? What if it's shit? What if everyone hates the sound of my voice? All this kind of stuff. And I think you just have to kind of push through that and just go, well, you know what? You're going to get better over time. It's going to organically grow and shift and change, which it has. And I think it will continue to do so. But I kind of just look at, those first 20 episodes that I've put out there, and it really is just me doing everything in between being a full-time person out in the world,
Yeah.
being, I'm a mum as well. I've got a house, I've got a kid, I got life to kind of live. So I think, yeah, I'm really, really happy with what I've put out there thus far, but I can definitely see where I would like to grow and improve and kind of the direction that I'd like to take the show as well.
Yeah, I love the real indie vibe about it. I love, people starting podcasts out of passion like you've done, and as you said, you've done everything. You've put in the hours. I mean, I just think it's such beautiful work that you've put together, and the fact that it's all you even makes it more special. And you look at those awards, and now you're up against teams of podcasters
I
where there's
know.
you know more,
I
and you just beat them all. So
know. No, thank you. It's yeah, that's another thing that kind of played into the whole like, oh, I'm not even going to go to the ceremony because what's the point, and it's, yeah, again, just making myself look like a fool in the end. But yeah, look, I would love to kind of get to a stage where I did have people that I could rely on to, whether it's help me edit or, take over some marketing stuff or whatever. I think that, pardon me, fundamentally, because the history, the stories, like that is what is important to me. I know that I'll never let go of that. I think if I had a pipe dream of, yes, this person can be my editor, this person can do my marketing, that would be great. But I think in terms of doing the research, doing the writing, doing the recording, like that, I will never kind of let go of that, because that's what's important to me.
Definitely, that's your individual slant on it. So what about just going back to the very first episode? You say you had some material together for a
Yep.
couple of years. Do you remember what it was like when you hit record the very first time? Was it on your computer? Yeah, just take us through. Were you nervous? Because a lot of it, you're just talking to you, you're recording scripts into the microphone. And for me,
Yeah.
that's some of the hardest stuff as a podcaster, especially early on, because for some reason, your self-conscious brain just goes up, tenfold when you're by yourself. How did you feel?
Yeah, much like that, really. I do think because I am a performer by nature. My life is mostly on stage or in front of people. So I think that element of the nerves didn't quite land. I think I'm happy to go, okay, now we're on or we're performing kind of thing in a weird way, which I guess, but I think for me, the podcast, it was so deeply personal that I actually didn't even feel like it was a performance. It was really just like, okay, this is something that matters to me that I really have to want to say, and I'm going to get it out there. But in terms of, I remember, so the first episode that I recorded, it was 2020. Was it 2020? Yeah, it was end of 2020 that I first hit the record button. So I was in a different place. I was living somewhere else, and it was probably like 9:30 or 10 p.m. at night. I was like, I've let this go on for too long. Just fucking sit down and just do it. You can do it again if you need to. Just start. And I didn't have a studio, of course, or anything. So my son was in bed, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. I poured a glass of wine, and I had this big, like, old wooden dining table, and I actually put a blanket over the top of it, and then sat underneath my dining room table with a little lamp and my laptop and a USB microphone. Like I was in a little fort in my lounge room.
I love this imagery.
And just did it, and just kind of was like, okay, this is the starting point. And it was really exciting. Just that tingly kind of exciting feeling of like, okay, you have no idea what you're doing, but you're starting. It's the start of something. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, I love that story of just starting. You've done a lot of preparation, but I think that's just the best way to podcast is just start doing it and get better. It might not work for every show, but I know with my podcasting, it was the same thing. I just thought I'm just going to start and then learn along the way. And
yeah,
I think that's a good way of doing it. And I think, as you say that about podcasting, you can produce it yourself. You can. And I think actually the listeners enjoy that journey, like hearing the show develop.
I think so. I mean, for me as a podcast listener, I definitely enjoy that. I definitely enjoy just that really kind of interpersonal, homegrown, the little kinks and wobbles are great. I really enjoy that. I think listening, there are some shows that I absolutely love that are very highly produced and they sound so perfect, but I think they're great for different reasons. I think when you can establish a bit of a kind of relationship with a host and see kind of, like I said, kinks and wobbles is where it's at for me. And you can have a little laugh with them and you just build that relationship and see that change over time. Yeah.
A lot of kinks in your show, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Especially the siblings having sex. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
I will preface that when anyone listening, I think you do need a starting point. Like there needs to be a base level standard. And from what I know of you, like you started at a good point. Like you've done your preparation, you had a microphone, you've done a lot of performing. So yeah, just anyone listening now, I don't think necessarily just turning on your iPhone is a good way to start a podcast.
No. Yeah, that's probably a good little mention. I definitely had done a lot of research into, recording. I have very, very little, but some experience with, audio engineering just through sound production for my performance and things like that. So I wasn't kind of, just completely clueless.
Definitely not.
So we can still do better.
I think an artist is never happy.
That's it.
So the show's been going for a while now. How has it been received? I guess, in the sort of circles you move in, you talk about you have all these relationships with, people that are in, sex workers, in the dancers, showgirls, and, people that are in these sort of industries around eroticism. What's the reception been to Controversy?
It's been honestly fabulous. I kind of wish I'd had a few more kind of naysayers having a go at me, because that's a bit of a challenge that I'm almost looking forward to in a way. But sadly, everyone has just been really enthusiastic, really, really lovely. I think what I've loved in terms of response, because it's something that was really important to me, is that I wanted to be able to kind of bridge this gap between being informative and kind of educational to maybe people who have no experience or not much of a clue about kind of the things that I'm talking about. But it was also kind of more important to me to do, I don't know if the word, it's like not do justice, but I wanted to really insinuate that all of the things that I'm talking about, all the people that I'm talking about, they're just real, wonderful people. I think a lot of the time, I have a bit of a problem with, there's so many kind of books and shows out there that are very much like, the diary of a sex worker, and they sort of try to make these stories kind of entertainment, or it's a bit speculative, or spotlight, you're kind of like you're sort of peering into this person's world. I didn't want that. That's not what the show is about. It's really just about, it's actually the opposite of that. It's kind of just tearing the curtains down and just going, like, this is life and this is real, and it's not something to kind of have a sticky beak at, so I think a lot of the feedback that I've had from people I work with or associate with has been really positive, in the sense that they, I've had people say, oh, I just felt like it would be like us having a chat, on a Friday night, and having a laugh about life and work and stuff like that. And that's really great. And then on the flip side, I've also had people, including, I will say, my dad. My dad was someone who has listened, and he was like, wow, kind of, I do have some hesitations about some of these things, and I don't really talk to you about them because I kind of don't really know if I want to know the answers. But, listening to it, listening to you talk about certain topics is really fascinating, and I've learned loads. And so to me, that's great. It's just, it's I need to be able to be relatable and do justice to multiple audiences is a big thing for me.
Yeah, everyone loves talking to their parents about sex. It's everyone's first off thing. They love hearing about their parents' sex life. They like telling their every dad wants to hear from their daughter about their sex life. As someone who has a 16-year-old daughter, I don't want to know a thing. If she ever starts a podcast called anything like Controversy, I will not be listening. I can tell you that right now.
And I fully respect that. And yeah, I think it was actually a bit of a turning point in my dad and my relationship, because I think we very much operate on that. But I think what I'm trying to do, or what I by default am doing in all of my work, not just the podcast, is really kind of, again, just taking away that stigma of sexuality or eroticism in kind of performance, and just kind of going like, this is life, we're all sexual beings in one way or another, like sex is how we all arrive into this world. So we can kind of just take away that stigma and that taboo essence of it. And I say that, but I would also say I would never have been one to talk to my dad about that very openly. It's kind of like, this is my life philosophy, but it doesn't apply to me and my dad.
Did you look online and think, is there a way I can block my dad from listening to any more episodes?
Exactly. Sorry, I was going to say it did cross my mind, but then it kind of became a bit of a moment for me going, well, hang on, if I'm going to kind of put my money where my mouth is, then I just needs to be open. And so, saying to my dad, go on, like, listen to the show. Tell me what you think.
I listened to this show called Girls Gotta Eat, which is out of America, and it's two women talking about this sort of stuff. I think you'd like it. Girls Gotta Eat. And one of their dads does listen to the show, and often she'll say, Dad, I think you should fast forward this next bit.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny. So more on that answer. So I get the fact, is it sort of the glamorizing of the industry talking about, like, you don't want this sort of glamorizing the sex industry, as you say, of like people peeking in and it's all, fucking and crime and it's so, like, you don't want that kind of, you want to actually tell the real story. And then I also noticed you feel a sense of responsibility to represent these people in the right way. Like, it would be too easy to just cherry pick some of the good stuff, the glamorous stuff, and leave it at that. But you actually really want to tell the whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's not for better or worse. There's no intended outcome in terms of doing that. I just think, say, for example, using the example, I did a wonderful interview with Miss Marilyn, who is a very internationally acclaimed dominatrix based in Scotland. And I adored talking to her because she really presents herself as her whole self. She's not putting just certain parts of herself forward. She's very much like, yes, I am a dominatrix, and I have times in my life where I fly around the world and stay in fancy hotels and make thousands and thousands of dollars, doing horrific and explicit things to people for a living. And that's kind of one little portion of it. But she's also very, very quick to also go, and there's times when I don't get out of bed for 4 days, or I don't have enough money to pay my rent, or my bank accounts are getting shut down, or I'm suffering in my personal relationships, or, there's so many factors. And I just think the culture of sex and sexuality is so different to the reality of it. For example, sex is in media everywhere we look. The internet is so saturated with sex, not just in porn, but, in other places as well. And I think it's so easy to take certain parts and reject certain parts. And that goes for, there are plenty of people, and there's plenty of content out there that is what you would call sex positive. And it's very in your face, like, all sex is great and this is my lifestyle, and very much like trying to normalize that sort of behavior, which is wonderful. And then on the flip side, you've got people who are vocalizing their disapproval for this and kind of going, oh, like, look at this is terrible, this is immoral, this is causing XYZ problems or whatever. And I kind of just wanted to be I don't know if I'm definitely not impartial, but I just wanted to be someone that kind of goes, yeah, but there are pros and cons of everything, and that's what life is. There's no specific part of life that is purely positive. There are challenges and there are downsides and there are difficulties. And there is also glamour and fun and excitement in everything. And I think as a society, we're just so obsessed with kind of either pulling apart sexuality and dissecting it and analyzing it and deciding what's acceptable and what's not, or we're just, it's a difficult one for me to kind of explain, but I just think
It sounds like you want to just tell you don't want to try and bring your biases to telling the story, that you want to.
No,
Yeah.
and look, I'm very much I personally love these stories, for many reasons, and I love the people that I share my life with. But I think it's not simple. Nothing, it's life, and I'll say that over and over. It's kind of just like, it's life, and it has its ups and downs. And I think to try to kind of categorize specific things like sex or sexuality or sex workers or sex education or figures from history, and we kind of go, oh, they are doing really well, they are good, they are bad, it just doesn't work like that. And I think the more that we can just cultivate really normative, open conversations, have a laugh, acknowledge that sometimes, it's a bit weird, it's a bit uncomfortable, or it's, that's maybe not my thing, but that's your thing. And just, I think the more we do that, the more we can kind of realize that this is just a part of life, that is all good. And and I think when you feel isolated, that's when things can potentially, go wrong. I think I definitely grew up as a very, I would say, like, sex positive person. I didn't have a particularly sex positive family, but I was very interested in sex and sexuality from a really young age. That doesn't mean I was out having sex from a really young age, but to me, it was always just beautiful. Like, I always had a desire to be around things that to me were sensual or erotic, or I see beauty in eroticism, and I just always have. And so I think, but that was very isolating for me because I was surrounded by friends and family who were just going like, oh, she's into.
How did that manifest itself?
It manifested itself probably, so going back to, for example, my grandma and her wonderful supply of like old Hollywood or kind of pre-Hays Code kind of noir like films and things like that. So for me, it was sort of an obsession with I would say sort of like the femme fatale was a really big thing, or the the lead, not so much the leading lady. I'm much more into kind of the villains, I think, than anyone. It was just because in those times, the villain, the femme fatale, was the she was sensual and sexy and kind of didn't give a shit what anyone else thought. So I definitely had an obsession with that. And then it was probably more in terms of aesthetics. I always had a real love of vintage glamour. So, hair, makeup, fashion. And then in terms of, I have danced a lot my whole life, so growing up as a dancer, but then pretty much as soon as I turned 18, I wanted to do more commercial dance styles. I wanted to just express myself in a way that was, I guess, what you would say is more sexual. I think, for example, I was teaching pole dancing for a really long time. I worked in a strip club. Like, that kind of was my two worlds colliding in terms of a love of glamour and sensuality, and then dance, that kind of made sense for me. And also just in things like literature, the types of books that I read. I was one of those kids that, I was 12 and I just wanted to read like every banned book that had ever existed purely because it had been banned. And I was like, why is this shit getting banned? I don't get it. I want to know. I want to know why people think that this is the stuff that we shouldn't be looking at, or it's deemed unacceptable or whatever. So it might also just be, people often say that, I like just going against the grain, and maybe there's an element to that, but
rebel.
I think, yeah, a bit of a rebel, but it's kind of, it's a genuine, wholesome curiosity. It's not just going against it for no reason. I think I'm fundamentally fascinated by why people think the way that they do, and why societies or communities decide, what's okay and what's not, because that's just a whole thing. And I think when it comes to sex, again, as a young person, I was just like, but sex is one of, it's fundamental to our existence. There's like eating, sleeping, breathing, and fucking is kind of how we stay on this planet. And yet all of those other things are completely fine and normative, but the sex thing isn't. And I think that, just as a kid, I was like, that's weird.
Did you get much pushback from your parents or your family? Were they like, oh no, what's Velma up to again?
Yeah, a little bit. I think overall I have a very, very supportive family. Supportive in the sense that they're not necessarily my biggest cheerleaders. They're not in the background going, yes, Velma, like, we're so proud of you, go do your thing. But they've never stopped me. And they've always kind of been like, as long as you're happy, as long as you're safe, we love you. And I consider myself lucky for that, because I know plenty of people who absolutely do not have that experience. But I think as time has gone on, especially, for example, my dad, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I distinctly remember him saying that he was really proud of me. And that was like, sorry, what did you just say? Because, I think my parents' kind of dream for my life was very much, like, she's definitely, she's creative, she's imaginative, she kind of has to get that out of her system before she goes and, I don't know, studies communications and works at a desk 9 to 5. And I was always like, that ain't never gonna happen. And I think my parents also had concerns over just the logistics, like financial things, being a full-time artist or writer, there's no financial guarantee, there's no security there. And I was always very adamant that, like, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that I'm okay. And once again, as a parent, it's when you're younger and there's maybe not enough work, or cash is running dry, you're always okay to, like, live off 2-minute noodles for a little while. But when you have a kid, suddenly, you need to,
Can't do that.
You can't do that. So I think I've never had that pushback, but I think they've always trusted me to be okay. And I have been, and I think I'm proud, and I say proud, but there's a tiny element of, like, giving my parents the finger and being like, see, fuck you guys, I told you I could do it, of kind of going, I've made a living and made a life doing what, again, air quote, most people would say isn't achievable or isn't viable for a living, especially as a parent. So
it's amazing. I've got a few more questions before I let you go. What about when you won the award? Tell me, where were you? What were you doing? Were you just at home watching? Were you watching live the broadcast, or what happened?
So I had, like I said, fully psyched myself out, gone, you know what? Don't go to Sydney. What's the point? You won't have any friends. You'll be the uncool kids sitting in the corner alone. And so I had put my son to bed, and my partner was sitting on the couch. I had the live stream going of the award ceremony on my laptop. And, I watched a few, and as in, like, the introduction, and sort of, I was like, oh, this looks great. Kind of, like, it would have been lovely if I had gone. Okay. But, it is what it is. Anyway. And then I sort of felt a bit maybe angry at myself that I hadn't gone. So I sort of did the whole, like, I don't even want to watch this. What's the point? Let's turn it off and do something else. And I was like, I'm going to go have a shower. And it was my partner, Mike, who was like, nah, come on, like, sit down, watch. And then I think the category for sex and relationships came up, and he was like, sit your ass down, like we're watching this. I was like, okay, fine. So I was sitting on the couch, much like I am now, but in my pajamas, probably had a cup of tea and was feeling a bit sad and sulky that I hadn't gone to the award ceremony. And I sound so corny, but when I found out that when they announced Cntroversy as the winner, it was just one of those like frozen shock, like disbelief, like what? And I think Mike like jumped up off the couch and started like, he was like being all blokey, like
screaming, fist pumping.
Screaming, yeah, fist pumping, like someone had just something
like it was a footy game or something.
Yeah, yuck. Like so he was doing that, and I was just staring at the wall for a really long time. And then
Then did you start screaming?
No, I didn't. That probably took weeks, I think, for that to kind of hit. People kept, for weeks afterwards, people were going, "Oh my God, V, like you did it. Congratulations. That's so amazing." And I was just kind of like, what are you talking about? I don't, yeah, it's very, very surreal. And
sounds like you were in shock for a long time.
Absolutely. Still.
Well, I mean, congratulations. I mean, Best Sex and Relationship Podcast at the 2021 Australian Podcast Awards. That's a phenomenal achievement.
Thank you.
I heard your episode at the end of last year where you sort of look ahead to 2022 and you made some resolutions. One of them was, I think, to be a bit more like efficient, like you were talking about maybe less late nights. And do you remember this, or were you
no idea what you're talking about? Yeah,
okay,
no
so
idea.
I don't know how many glasses you're in by this stage, but you're saying, maybe drink a bit less and be a bit more efficient. How we're almost 2 months into 2022. How's that resolution coming along?
Well, you know what? It's actually going okay. I think I have had a really, really busy first couple of months of the year. Not sort of, I've been accruing things behind the scenes with the podcast, but I've been working and doing shows. I've just come back from the Adelaide Fringe Festival. And there's a lot of stuff going on. So far, so good. Look, not perfect. I don't believe in I don't want to become one of those people this year that like gets up at 5 a.m. and goes to the gym and has a, iced oat latte and a green smoothie. Like that will never be me ever, ever, ever.
Doesn't sound like you.
Sounds terrible. And
sounds
it's just
awful.
Not going to happen. But I think, it's just about finding that balance between, I tend to be one of those people that kind of goes all in, works on 20 projects at once, lives off.
So this was the New Year's Eve podcast I'm talking about. So no wonder.
I do remember.
No wonder you're probably a few champers in. You don't know what you said, do you?
No, I think, look, I might have been a couple of champers in, but I distinctly remember I was making a bunch of these beautiful like maraschino cherry martinis on New Year's Eve. So I may have had at least one of those by then. Okay. But I think, my point is just that I'm a very all or nothing person. And what tends to get me is when I go all in and I bust my ass and I just, put the blinkers on, and then eventually the wheels kind of come off. And when they come off, I turn into a absolute wreck of a human being in terms of my mental health. And I struggle to kind of get off the couch or do very basic things for a little while. And I think just that seesawing between the two, it's not good for anyone. And I think it's also very commonplace in kind of the world we live in. We're expected to kind of do so much and constantly be on the go. So my goal is more about finding that middle ground, drinking a glass of water every now and then, doing a little bit of work, having a little bit of rest, and just, So far that is actually going quite well, with the exception of the last 2 weeks of Adelaide Fringe, in which I was probably getting about 2 hours of sleep every night. So we won't count that, but
okay, no, it sounds like you're doing well. And what about like this year? You said you got big plans for the podcast.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, I think so. I've been working quite hard since late last year. So I haven't like I said, haven't released any new episodes in a little while because I basically had one of my little mental breakdowns where the wheels fall off. And then by the time I got my shit back together, I was like, okay, let's do this properly. So 2022 plans for the podcast. I have a little team coming together to help sort of delegate certain tasks, which will really just mean that I can produce more consistent content, which is something that I think people are wanting and that I would really like to deliver. I also have a lot more special guest episodes. So quite a few of them I've already recorded, which is really exciting. But just some really big people that are really, really important and doing really wonderful things in the world of whether it's entertainment or sex or historical literature, things like that. Just more stuff,
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
We all need more controversy.
That's
Velma,
right.
And for those watching on YouTube, you can see Velma's wearing some merch.
Oh yes, I am. It's very meta.
I love your logo.
My breasts on my breasts.
Well, I didn't even know you were the model. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yep. There you go.
Awesome. Look, last question. The way we end all our interviews is, what's your favorite memory related to podcasting?
Ooh.
Is a favorite episode? Obviously, winning the awards pretty huge, but yeah, what is it? What to you has tweaked your heart?
Oh, man, there's a few. Probably just off the top of my head, one thing that I remember being in this moment and just going, I'm on the right track. Whatever I'm doing, like this is a good thing. And that was recording the episode about foot fetishism with one of my dear friends, Ivana DeLune, who is an exceptional alternative model and performer. And yeah, I think we were just kind of sitting at her kitchen bench, just like, when you laugh, you kind of like snort stuff out of your nose. We were just sitting there doing that, laughing so much, like just shake laughing and snort laughing, and just that was just a real moment for me.
How many episodes in was that?
I think that was maybe episode 6.
Great.
I think so. Still very, very early, and in terms of where we recorded, the sound quality on that episode isn't great, but I love it because it's just us. It's such a glimpse into our bullshit that we are always up to. And I was just, it was a nice moment to be able to share that with people.
I love hearing that. And I completely empathize. I was recording, actually, I think it was like my first or second episode of my cricket podcast. And straight away I was like, I'm in the right spot. Like, this is it. I can do a lot more of this. So I totally get that. Velma, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Host Revealed to talk about Cntroversy. It's a wonderful show. You've done so well. And I just wish you every success.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun.